So, oops, okay, I'll manage it. Hello, thanks for being here. Before I start, I have to apologize because I might not be 100% on my usual level because I'm fighting a cold, but if I had time, the intake of caffeine and ibuprofen, I should be okay. Hello, haven't seen you 20 years or 16 years or something. Yeah. Hello. So yeah, as Rudy said, yeah, I used to be part of your wonderful group back then. So I'm going to be talking about how to actually use open source in legal way and in compliant way, in ways that makes all our life much easier. So a bit of things about me. I'm Greek, as you probably guessed from my name. I'm living now in Munich for the last 8 years, because you've heard about Greece in the news. I have studied computer science and was doing, compilers and strange things. I'm now working for Intel, and I am the what's the official title? Senior Open Source Compliance Engineer. So basically, what I'm doing is I'm overseeing whatever Intel is doing for open source, using or producing, because they're doing a lot of both, and I make sure that everything is according to what has to be, what should be there, right? I am doing free and open source since before they were called like that, so yeah, back in the day. So I tend to always have something long-term view, right? So I don't care about the, the framework du jour, what's happening today and stuff like that, but yeah, what will happen in the ecosystems of open source years or decades from now. And I've been a member of different communities because through my career I've played the role of, developer or system administrator or network administrator, whatever. Now I'm the compliance guy, so yeah, that's a different niche community that we're meeting. So what is this thing about legal compliance, right? You're going to be getting a crash course on IP, intellectual property. I don't expect that you're going to be passing legal exams after that, but you should know what happens with software, right? So in case you don't know, do people know about copyright and stuff? Or they have just heard the word, it's copyright in something that I put in the file, and I'm not sure exactly what it means. I'll take that as, yeah. Okay, so, so the copyright is the legal framework that protects the expression of ideas, right? So it's about expression of ideas. It's not about a general idea. Let me think of a story where boy meets girl, boy falls in love with girl, they try to get married, but the parents object and stuff like that. This is an abstract idea. We're talking about a specific expression. I wrote down the story. My name is Shakespeare, and I wrote something called Romeo and Juliet. And this expression, this specific expression, is protected by law. It's automatically granted. As soon as I start writing something, right, it belongs to me. I don't have to apply somewhere in order to get the copyright or a stamp or anything like that, right? It works all over the world, right? Thankfully, nowadays, right? Back before, in the 80s, it was a different state of the whole world, but now everybody understands the same copyright basics. So this is general copyright. Obviously, we're going to be talking about copyright of software, but think of it again. As soon as I start writing software, it belongs to me, the copyright. Copyright means the right to copy, right? It was created because people were producing books and who could copy and produce another, the identical book in another edition, right? So I have the right to copy, and I'm the only one who can publish my book, right? Extension in software, I write my software, nobody can copy it and do whatever they want with that, right? Fundamental to the copyright law is the whole idea of derivative work. So if I take something and I manipulate it a little, I modify it and stuff like that, I create something new, which is a derivative work of the original one, right? And this derivative work would not have existed if the original one was not present, right? It's something that you produced based on something, right? And the copyright law does not mention any numbers or, either absolute or relative. So to turn it back again to the software domain, I wrote some software, right? Lots of lines of code. People cannot take part of it and use it somewhere else. And it doesn't matter if the part they took is a small part of mine, right? Or it's a small part in theirs, right? It doesn't matter if I take, 100 lines from your million-line program, and it doesn't matter if I take 10 lines and I put it in my million-line program. It's still something that I have taken because the resulting million-line program would not have existed in this specific form without these 10 lines, right? So the copyright law, the framework, the legal framework does not mention anything about sizes, either relative or absolute, right? You can obviously understand that, since we are, programmers, we go to the extremes. You can have a 0 and say, this is my copyrighted 0, and you cannot use 0. Yeah, okay, this doesn't work, obviously. And, I equals 0 is also something that anyone can use without saying that you copied from that. As soon as you go a little further, then you have to think about what it is that you're copying from one software to the other, right? Sure, yeah, of course.
So what happens if, let's say, for example, somebody has a book of Shakespeare and asks me to write an extra chapter?
Right.
So what happens with the copyright then? Is this chapter my copyrighted part of this book? Or is it a derivative work?
Yeah, okay, so first of all, if you write it because somebody asked you for that, it depends on your employment agreement, but probably the copyright is theirs because you wouldn't be doing it if they didn't assign to you. So they own the copyright, right? The words that you wrote, and it's you wrote, or code or, a poem or whatever, you wrote it from scratch, the copyright stays there, right? Whether you can use characters defined by somebody else, this is another, it's not part of the same copyright, right? Because you didn't copy things. For example, you're not allowed to create a Batman story because Batman, the rights to the character belong somewhere else. This is not copyright, right? This is other forms of intellectual protection. And thankfully, until now, software has not reached that point with we have characters and fictional entities that we want to copy and stuff like that, right? So the basic thing with the copyright law is that the holder, so one who holds the copyright, can set the terms of what can be done with this thing that I produced. So I wrote a wonderful book, a novel, and I say anyone can read it. Or you cannot read it unless you pay me. First you pay me, and then I give you a copy and you can read it, but you're not allowed to sell it to somebody else. Or you can go to extremes, right? You can say anyone can read it, but it has to be raining outside. And you're not allowed to read it if it's sunny. Again, I can set whatever terms I want, right? Even more in software, so you can say, this is my software, anyone can run it, but you're only allowed to run this executable only on Tuesdays. Yeah, that's a perfectly legal thing. The legal framework of copyright gives me the right to say that. Right. Sorry, yeah.
Another question that came up recently on the net. Suppose I throw out some work of me with the copyright notice on it.
Yeah.
And after a couple of years, I want to change that.
Yeah.
If I change that,
Yeah.
does it also apply to the one?
No, you do not go back to the past in time and change whatever. You can, do I have? No, but we can go with that. If I release something under these terms, I can release a new version tomorrow under new terms, or the same version under new terms, but I cannot go back to the past and stop, the fact that I have done it 1 year ago. Right. So if we're talking about software and usual software licenses, and I'm going to be talking about them in a while. Okay, the legal part is taking long. If I release a software under Apache, right, and then tomorrow I change my mind and I say I'm going to release it under GPL v3, right, I cannot go back to the past and say this is not Apache anymore. Right, the version I had released in the past is Apache and will ever be Apache. I can release the same thing under GPL v3, I can release a new version under GPL v3, and stuff like that, right? But I cannot go back and, retroactively change things that happened, right? Now, the important part of the copyright law framework is that the holder can set the terms for derivative works as well. So, you can have you can set your terms and say, this is my software, everyone is allowed to run it if it's raining or it's Tuesday, and you can modify it and produce something new, right? But the modification, the new versions, can only be run on Sundays, right? So I can put terms in whatever you will be creating as a derivative work of mine. Right. And you understand this is, again, to protect the authors, and, you can translate my work, but then you cannot, give it free and give it the right for everyone to translate it again, because I will lose rights and all this stuff. Right. So basically, before you use anything, you need to have a license. Right. And you need to have a license that allows you to use something. Right. And because we're talking about open source, you need to have a license that allows you to use your password. Yeah. You can tell me. Yeah. Oh, okay. Good. Thank you. Yeah, you. Yeah. So you definitely need a license in order to use anything, right? So that's good. Good. It's over there. Go left.
It's over there.
You found it. Good. So, you need a license. What is a license? License is a predefined set of, a predefined text, right? Instead of you sitting down and thinking of what should I allow, what should I forbid, and all this stuff, other people have done this work before you, thankfully. Very boring work creating software licenses, makes lousy conversation at parties. I don't recommend it for everyone. Right. But, so the license, ideally I would also click here. Yeah. So the license basically codifies the rights and obligation, right? What the rights is what you may do, right? You have the right to copy the code. You have the right to modify the code, right? And the obligation is what you have to do, right? So if it's a typical BSD license, you are allowed to use it and modify it, but you have to mention my name, right? If it's a typical GPL license or copyleft license, you're allowed to modify it, create something new, but this new has to stay under the same license. This is the whole idea of copyleft, right? I'm releasing something under GPL, for example, or LGPL, or Eclipse, or Mozilla, different copyleft licenses. You're allowed to use for any purpose that you find fit. You're allowed to modify it, but whatever you create has to be under the same license. This is the copyleft effect, right? So basically, the licenses specify all this, what you have to do and what you may do, right? So we're not going to be spending time analyzing the whole licenses. I'm giving this training way too much, way too many times. But so you have actually to read the license and find out what it says. Unfortunately, not fun to read software licenses, right? There are legal texts. Most of them, at least the new ones, were created by lawyers and not, computer guys. It's a difficult domain. The authors sometimes understood what they were talking about, sometimes they were not. Fortunately, we have advanced a lot during, the last decade, that people have stopped creating their own licenses and they're using a small set of, licenses that are well known. So, it's Apache, MyDBSD, GPL, LGPL, Mozilla. I mean, there are hundreds of licenses out there, but some of them are more spread than others, right? So, actually, a couple of years ago, and this was a thing that I showed Rudy years ago, I have done an analysis of the license text for a legal journal, and so this is the size of words for different licenses. And you can see it goes from 17 words to 7,000 words, and the average is 1,300. These are around, I don't remember, 300 licenses that are in a license list that we curate, and some of them are the dark green ones are the OSI approved, the open source approved. All of them are open source licenses. But you can see, there are a variety of lengths of licenses. And actually, the length of a license is not even a nice indication of how hard it is to read, but the longest sentence in words, there are licenses which has 270 words in a single license, right? So, it's, from 10 words, which is a pretty easy phrase, until 270 and stuff like that. And actually, I wrote a readability scanner, which uses the SMOG, which is metric of how many years you have to go into school in order to understand this text. And there are licenses that you have to be 28 years of school. The most complicated one is around 29 years of school. You have to go in order to understand what it says, right? There are a couple,
How do you know?
Sorry?
How do you know?
Oh, the readability metric is, Oh, yeah, well, yeah. I don't think anyone is, Okay, there are officially, I do not put names of license here. So, but you have to be legal compliant. What does legal compliance mean for software, right? So, I'm sure you all know, software nowadays, you don't write everything from scratch. You're using components, right? You use your own code, and you use components either open source, and maybe you also have proprietary components in there, right? In order to combine all of them, you should comply, satisfy all the requirements of all licenses that are there, right? That makes sense, right? It's straightforward. Unfortunately, this is not trivial nor easy at all, right? First of all, you have to know what's exactly inside your software, okay? I'm sure that many of you are developers. I'm not sure if you know exactly what is in the software, but especially if you're not a developer or if you're a marketing person who wants to sell a piece of software that somebody produced, they have to know exactly what is inside the software, right? Usually, since I'm doing this for a large corporation, I'm playing a detective game called CSI Licenses. So, I have to find out what's inside this piece of wonderful software that engineers produce, right? And unfortunately, it's not easy, right? Then once I find out exactly what it is, I have to transmit this information to somebody else, right? So when I'm giving you a piece of software, let's say that Intel gives you, ICC, the Intel compiler, C compiler, they have to tell you, remember, all the obligations that we have to comply, since we're using, zlib inside. Zlib is written by Mr. Adler. It's under the zlib license. The zlib license means that I have to do some things. I'm allowed to use it, I'm allowed to modify it, but I have to, stuff like that. So I have to list everything that is in there, right? As you can imagine, when organizations are becoming larger and software starts getting exchanged and we are producing what we now call software supply chain, a company gets some software, they integrate it with others, they give it to somebody else, they integrate it to others, they give it to somebody else. In the end, it's, a car is produced, which has everything in there. You have to transmit all this information. We used to have, just README texts with third-party components inside this software. We had Excels with, lots of things with column. This is the version, this is the software, this is the version, this is the license, and stuff like that. But everybody was creating their spreadsheets a little different, stuff like that. So around 10 years ago, we sat down and we said, okay, we all want to have this thing done better. It's not our competitive advantage. It's not our core competence. Let's work together. So lots of companies started working together in order to produce an open standard called SPDX. Right? Who has ever heard of SPDX before? I'm amazed. Thank you. Wow. Okay, so SPDX is just a format for exchanging this information. Right. It's an open standard for communicating the components, the license, the copyrights. We maintain, I mean the SPDX volunteers, because it's a volunteering project. We maintain the specification of how to do that and a license list. And the wonderful vision is, if I find a way to clearly communicate that, then everyone should stop playing with spreadsheets and reformatting and stuff like that, right? So a few words on SPDX. Why do you want to use it? Well, if the developers are the people who are producing software, right? It will help your user comply with the license. Right, because when you release a piece of software and you say that this software has the obligation that, it uses this component that has the obligation, it's much easier to have it in a standardized format. On the other hand, the users know exactly what they're getting for each piece of software, right? And then for embedded systems and supply chains that, move software from organization to organization, we save time and money and hopefully we get accurate information, right? So the whole idea is that we use SPDX to describe license. And we have this wonderful thing called license list, short identifiers, which basically we have a large list of licenses. I'll show that in a minute. And we have short identifiers so that people know that when they write BSD 3 clause is the 3 clause BSD, this is the official text, right? And then you can tag your source files with the SPDX short identifier and provide a document describing exactly what's inside your software, right? So each of these 3 steps, let's see the license list. It's a list of licenses. I checked last night, we're around 390 licenses and 35 exceptions. Because it's not a license, we also have exceptions, right? It's not so easy in our life, right? And for each license, we have the name, for example, General Public License version 3. We have a short identifier, GPL 3.0 or later, if you want. The canonical license text, this is the text of the license. A URL for the text. We maintain a couple of bits if it's OSI approved or if FSF is considered a liberal license. And standard header text if the license says you have to put this header on your files. Right. And then we have matching guidelines to determine if text matches, because you would be surprised of how many variations wonderful developers can do on a single piece of text when they are allowed to modify things. Right. I can spend hours talking about stories and stuff like that. For example, Linux is GPL version 2, right? The Linux kernel, right? Do you know how many variations of GPL 2 text were found in the Linux source files? Pick a number. 60. How many? 60. 60. Go up. Yeah, it's in the thousands, right? Yeah. Yeah, because somebody put a comma in there. Why? I don't know. The GPL says, in the end, it says, if you want to get the full license text, you can write to FSF, comma, the address. And FSF has moved to 3 different addresses in the last 18 years, right? And so they have different text in there. And yeah, maybe they have the HTTP FSF.org, maybe they don't, all this stuff. So yeah, we templatize. So for example, in the BSD3 clause, if it says, you should mention the name of, we put a template there that you can change the name, or, because when you find a license text, you should say that you should mention the name of Alexios in your acknowledgements, right? But this Alexios should match anything because the license is the same, and the copyright holder is a different one, right? So we also have short identifiers like MIT, BSD3 clause, or GPL2 or later, right? And we have expressions because nothing is simple in our lives. We can have a file that is licensed under Eclipse Public License version 2 or Mozilla Public License version 2, right? Because the developer decided to make it usable by anyone, right? And so they chose this combination of licenses, and we have to express that is one or the other, right? Now, how do you use this thing? If you are a developer, that's very easy. Just put one line in the beginning of your files, please. And put this as a comment, SPDX-license.identifier, colon, the license name or expression name if you want. Right. It's machine readable, it's a single line, I can grep it, because otherwise it's a whole text and it's not easy. It makes it easy to know the license of the file. For projects that have CLAs and contributor license agreement and developer certificate of origins, these are wonderful things that you learn when you contribute open source. It says that you have to mention the license for each file that you contribute. And that's an easy way to just put a single line there. It's a standard format. People understand it, and it's helpful. Right. So lots of projects now start using that a lot. Last November, we went through the Linux kernel, and we put this line on every file on there, on every file that we could easily decide what it is, right? Then you have to do, the CSI part and find out who wrote it and what did they mean, stuff like that. Because, sorry.
So what proportion was easy?
The proportion, we are now at around 90-something% of files, which is pretty good. The problem with the, you need, manual intervention for the rest, right? We're now running some more aggressive identification parts that will be pushed into 5.2. Right? Kernel 5.2 will have these things. Yeah, okay. It's not. So if you typically find a file that says, I wrote this, my name is John or whatever, copyright John, this is released under GPL. That's all. You cannot deduce that this is GPL2, maybe it's GPL1, right? So, yeah, things like that. The kernel is a strange beast and has, thousands of files that, you cannot easily find the original authors. They cannot explain what they were meaning and stuff like that. And people have died, unfortunately. So, yeah. So having a single line like that, especially in new code bases, because, again, the kernel is a special case because we are dealing with so much technical debt or licensing debt or whatever you want to call it, right? Files that are there for decades, right? That it's not easy, right? On the other hand, for new code bases, just having this line really helps, right? And in every relicensing, big relicense project, OpenSSL now is being relicensed from the strange own license, the OpenSSL license. It's been changed to Apache, right? And they will put Apache 2 everywhere so that we know exactly what is happening, right? When they ever release it. Anyway, so this is for each file, right? And then we have the SPDX documents, which describe the whole thing as a package, right? So basically, think of it as a table of contents or bill of materials if you're talking about, if you're in another domain and you're transferring products that have materials, or manifest or whatever, all the software content inside your package, right? So we have defined this format. It's flexible. We can have it, in XML, tag value format, or spreadsheets. We're now talking, JSON LD or whatever, people YAML or just a converter. That's the easy part, right? And it's accurate because it focuses on capturing the facts and allow whatever interpretation, right? Because again, when you combine different things, right, it might be that it works okay technically, but it might not work okay legally, right? Think of it like if I take one component that says, let's go to the extreme examples, this software can only be run on Tuesdays. And I'm using another component that says this software can only be run on Wednesdays. I can combine them together, and I have something that can never be run legally because part of it can only run on Tuesdays and part of it can only run on Wednesdays, right? So you should be thinking about this, legal compatibility of things, right? So the SPDX document, basically, I'm not going to go through all that, but it's basically, this is the full document that describes, this is the package, this is the file, snippets, if I want to go, these 10 lines were copied and they have a different license or a different copyright author, and, other license information, relationship between packages, between files and everything, and you can have comments and stuff like that. It's, pretty detailed. We've been working lots of years on that one, and if not, please contribute, and we can improve it in the next version. We have it.
Does this software have some intelligence, like this license conflicts with this?
This is a legal decision that you should be asking your business unit attorney to determine. So I can have a software that implements different rules. Whether you trust my rules or not, this is your own thing, right? Again, this is restricted information. This is GPL v2. This is Apache 2.0, right? If you bring this to Intel, we'll tell you, no, GPL v2 and Apache 2.0 are not compatible. You cannot combine them, right? If you give it to somebody else, maybe they have a different legal opinion. But again, this is just the thing. Sorry.
Will you also work with IDE
Right, so yeah, this is the next step. Thank you. So yeah, you obviously need tools for that. I'm not expecting anyone to open up VI for everything and put these lines in there. Even I have shortcuts for that and keep abbreviations. But yeah, there are many tools available in order to collect them, to create, to convert, to verify that what I got matches what the files are, because we have checksums in there and all this stuff. Compare, present views and stuff like that. There are lots. And then, the next step is, I'm talking to the Microsoft guys. Whenever you create a new project in Visual Studio, the files will not start with a just comment, stuff like that. They will also have this line. The same way as GitHub now, when you create a new repository, it asks you, what license do you want, right? Stuff like that. Yeah, because the main problem, if you don't have a license, remember the first slides, you're not allowed to use it, right? So if you just create something and you push it on GitHub, right, no one can use it legally, right? You have to give them the right to use it, right, which is a license. So yeah, after lots of years, GitHub finally decided that, yeah, when you created one, you should be, you're getting a question, and unfortunately, you can still answer no license, which makes no sense, but yeah, okay, I'll convince Jeff at some point. I'm still pushing for that. And that's about it. Okay, so the caffeine worked.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we got time for just one question.
Just one.
Just one.
Okay.
And then...
But I'll be around.
Yeah.
If you want to play legal, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the title of your speech was how to
make open source more usable.
More easily usable.
Yeah.
But
you haven't seen that.
No. In fact, it's only got harder. So,
so in order
to comment on that.
Yeah. Okay. So. In order to make it usable, not from the usability perspective, but from the legal perspective, you have to tell me how I can use that, right? If you just, as I just said, if you just commit and push something without any information, I cannot legally use it, right? And most of the developers out there and users of GitHub will never care. The big players who, unfortunately, feel a little targeted, like they have painted a big target because they have large, fat wallets, and people go after them for legal reasons. We pay more attention to whatever is there, right? So if you try to be cute, you might think you're being cute by, there are GitHub repositories that says, fuck licenses, I don't care, whatever. Yeah, that doesn't help your project, right? Unfortunately. Maybe the title should be a little more legal, then the room would be completely empty. But
okay.
Sorry about that.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Sure.